when you get in the game to make a difference for the values and principles that made America the greatest nation in history, you get attacked. Is just the nature of the, particularly today. I mean, look. I mean, we all know the obvious example is what Brett Kavanaugh and his family are going through. This is unbelievable. That's just going to. I tell my buddies and the colleagues in the Freedom Caucus, you know, if the press isn't saying something bad about you, you're not doing anything any good, right? That's just the way it works. I mean, just so when you, I learned this a long time ago. Good things in life typically don't just happen. If you want to accomplish something of meaning, significance, and lasting value, it takes work. It takes sacrifice. It takes effort. And most importantly, it takes a willingness to assume the risk associated with trying to accomplish something of meaning and significance. Because there's always a chance you fail, and there's always going to be the naysayers and the doubters that tell you not to do it. All kinds of examples in scriptures where people are told you can't do it, and yet they did. So I appreciate you taking the risk and getting in the game. It's, you know, Teddy Roosevelt said it's not on the sidelines, it's in the arena. So thank you for being there. And when you're there, like I said, the press, I love the line. I say this all the time because Cal Thomas has a way of capturing important concepts. And he talked about the way normal people see things and the way the elite national media, you know, the New York Times and the Washington Post, the way they view things. And he had a great line. He says, I get up every morning, I read my Bible and the New York Times so I can see what each side's up to. So there's a lot of truth to that. So thank you for doing that. And understand that willingness to step off the sidelines and get in the game and fight for the things that have lasting value has been a part of this nation's heritage since the beginning. One of our family's favorite movies is the musical 1776. So I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's got some language, but it's a great show. We made our kids watch it even when the boys liked it because of the language, I think sometimes, you know, boys are. But there's great values. They love the movie. We've watched it so many times we can't even count, but it's the story of those men in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, 1776, writing the document that declared to the world why it was actually appropriate to commit treason, right? They outline why this time it's okay to commit treason. And here are the reasons. We're going to spell it out for the entire world to see why we're taking this action. And of course, you follow this debate in that hot summer of 1776. And Adams, he's the guy pushing. He wants to get the thing signed, get it voted on, and let's go. And it is just driving him crazy that they take so long. But the scene that captures all this is near the end. Jefferson has written the Declaration. They're now doing what Congresses do. They're marking it up, right? They're changing, amending, doing what, you know, take all day. They're marking it up, what Congresses do. And so, again, they're in the debate, and one member stands up and he says, we need to change this paragraph. Because when King George sees this, it's just a little too rough. We need to tone this down. We need to change. And Adams rolls his eyes, and pretty soon another member stands up and he says, yeah, in this section, this is, when Parliament sees this, you know, this is too strong as well. We're going to have to change this. And Adams rolls his eyes again. Third member stands up and says, look, this section is going to have to go altogether because this could jeopardize our deep sea fishing rights off the coast of New England. And Adams can't take it any longer, and he stands up and says, it's a revolution, dang it. We're going to have to offend somebody, right? So, and the point is, we don't want to offend anyone. We just want to stand for the truth. We want to stand for those values that make this country the greatest nation ever. Through the sport of wrestling, wrestling's been kind to, when I was Isaac, how old are you, Isaac? 10. When I was 10, I was getting ready to say 10. You looked about this. When I was 10, I had life figured out like most 10-year-olds. I knew what I was going to do, right? I was going to play middle linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I knew it was, I grew up in the 70s, and the Steelers were winning everything, so I loved the Steelers. Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, I can name them, Mean Joe Green, I can name them all. But my favorite guy was Jack Lambert, Kent State. Some of you guys remember, played middle linebacker for this. I knew I was going to do that, but you can all see the good Lord had other designs. I'm 5'7.5" on a good day, so I had to wrestle. But wrestling's been great to our family. My brother's done. I mean, it's been all our boys, and I got a bunch of nephews. They all wrestle in college. It's been great. It's a great sport, I think, for teaching young men the things they need to know. But I have the opportunity to wrestle. I wrestled in Cuba, been to Cuba a couple times, been to the Soviet Union. And I tell people, you go to places like that, you thank the good Lord you live here. I tell folks, I was in Moscow in February. Moscow in February, it's like 400 below zero. I mean, you really, and the food was terrible. You really think, and then you go to Cuba, and again, this is not an indictment on the people. People are people. We're all ordinary folk in need of God's grace. People are people. It's the system. It's when liberty is restricted. Cuba, they were, and this I was there in 1988, 1990, they were still driving 59 Chevys. My guess is today in 2018, they're still driving 59 Chevys before Castro took over. I mean, Cuba was a warm Soviet Union. That's what it was. And again, it's not the people, but this is what happens when freedom is attacked and basic principles are attacked. And there are really just three basic concepts that we have to defend all the time. And they were most succinctly stated. I had a chance to meet this guy because I've been talking about you remember the story of Scott O'Grady? The guy shot down over Bosnia. Remember this guy? Actually made a movie. Owen Wilson starred in the movie and all that. You remember? And I've been telling this Scott O'Grady story, and I gave a speech, and somehow he saw it, and he called me. He called the office and said he wanted. I was like, yeah, I'll meet Scott O'Grady. This guy's a hero, right? He got the congressional medal from President Clinton and all when this happened. But he was shot down over Bosnia. He had to survive several days in the wild. Read his book if you haven't read his book. I just reread it. Very good. Had to survive several days. Ultimately rescued, brought to safety. When he's brought to safety, he stood at a podium like this because all the press wanted to talk to this guy. I mean, he'd just been through this amazing experience. And Scott O'Grady summed up what this country's about, summed it all up, what life is about. He stood at a podium like this, bunch of microphones here, and he basically said three things. He said, first of all, I want to thank God because it's a miracle that I'm standing here today. He said, second, now I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to this effect. He said, I want to thank my family because it was while I was out there trying to make it, I knew they were thinking and praying for me. Knowing they were doing that helped motivate me to do what I had to do to make it. He said, I really want to thank my family. And then third, he said, I want to thank the guys who came and rescued me. I mean, they're the heroes. They're the true heroes. I want to thank my fellow servicemen who risked their lives to come save me. And I thought, this guy's figured it out. When he referenced God, he was getting at this idea of faith and how central the faith has played in the American experience from day one. And the idea that we now have people who want to drive faith completely out of the public square is scary to us. That's why what the Greens are doing with the Bible is so important. And we all know faith is important on a personal level, right? Relationship with the God of the universe through the work his son did when he came, bled, died, rose again is the most important thing. But it's also important on the aggregate, in the corporate sense, for the health of a country. And we need to keep fighting for that. And then when he referenced his family, look, this is you all know this, Phyllis knew that, this organization knows this. The first institution the good Lord put together wasn't the church, wasn't the state, it was moms and dads and kids. And the strength of that institution, I think, ultimately determines the strength of our culture and our country. And you just think about people impacted your life. For most people, it's their mom and dad. I mean, I think about my dad. My dad was a union worker at General Motors in Dayton, Ohio. My mom cleaned houses, put us all through college, made so many sacrifices for us. And you mentioned some of the things that I did in wrestling, and I talked a little bit about. But I used to work at my brother's camp. My brother coaches at our high school. Has had a phenomenal record. He has a successful wrestling camp. He gets about 1,500 kids over a 10-week period every summer. And I used to work for him before I got in Congress in the summertime at his camp. And in the course of camp, there'd always be some kid who'd walk up to you and they'd say, Coach, what was the biggest win in your career? And like I said, wrestling's been great. We've wrestled all over the country and been around the world in different places. But for me, the biggest win in my wrestling career came when I was a 15-year-old freshman in high school and was able to win the state tournament. And I tell people I won mostly because of my dad. When I stop and think about it, I won mostly because I was ignorant. I didn't know that freshmen weren't supposed to win the state tournament. I didn't know that kids from Southwest Ohio weren't supposed to beat those guys from Cleveland and Akron and Canton where wrestling was big. I didn't know that some small town country boy from Graham High School wasn't supposed to be a state champion. All I knew is what my dad told me. And he said, if you work hard and you set goals, good things can happen. And I was dumb enough to believe him. I mean, really, it's just I was. And I said, all right, well, I'll do it. But that dynamic plays out every generation in every single family when it's done right. Moms and dads making sacrifices, helping their kids so that they can have life a little better than they did. They, in turn, have a family do the same thing for their kids, and we get this amazing thing we call America. because of that core institution. And that's why this organization, in fighting to preserve that fundamental institution, the first thing God put together, is so darn important. And then last, and I'll spend a few minutes on this because I really think this is important. When Scott O'Grady referenced his fellow servicemen coming to save him, I think he was getting at the word we most associate with America, and that's the word freedom. I mean, stop and think about it. The United States military has always stood for freedom, and that's the exception. Throughout most of history, militaries have stood for tyranny and oppression, but not the United States Armed Forces. They have always stood for freedom and liberty, and frankly, not just for Americans, but for countless number of people around this planet. And freedom, right now, so Scott O'Grady, faith, family, freedom, he got it right, but right now, freedom is under assault from the left in this nation. It's just, I've never, and I'll get a little political here, but I have never seen the hard left take the extreme positions they are now taking, and those positions being embraced by the Democrat Party. You don't believe me? Think about these three statements. They applaud Kaepernick when he disrespects the flag. They embrace Cuomo when he says America was never that great, and they cheer on Maxine Waters when she says, go harass people who support our president. They embrace all that. That is scary. Polly and I got the treatment for the first time we've ever went to the theater here in town. We never, we're country folk from Western Ohio. We've never been to the theater, so this is 2.5 months ago. It's 2 days after Maxine Waters gave her first big rant about go harass people in the Trump who support President Trump. We're at the theater. We're inside. We're going up this ramp. Big crowd of people. We're all dressed, all this stuff. We're walking up. I got our tickets out, and I'm literally, because we've never been there before, I'm just looking for the lady in the red jacket, right? I'm looking for the usher. Tell us what door to go in. As we're standing there, all of a sudden I hear behind us this lady's voice, and she says, Jim Jordan. And just the way she said it, I thought, oh no, we're gonna get the treatment. And I was kind of afraid to turn. I just sort of did a quick little glance, and because there's someone always filming or something. I didn't want to I don't want to be on camera and let someone yelling at me like, well, Senator Cruz just went through it a couple days ago. And so then she starts it up, this lady, Jim Jordan, evil, shame, shame. She puts her hands up. Polly handled it great. She turned around and said, please stop. And then the lady says, I can't believe you're married to this man. And I told Polly later, you should have said, I can't believe it, I could have done a lot better. Polly handled it great. I was really looking for the lady in the red coat, man. Let me get to where we're going. We finally got in. But it's like we would never think of doing that to anyone. But that's how extreme the left is right now. And let me tell you something. The president's record over the last 20 months has been phenomenal. I don't know if you've all had a chance to meet the president. I say this every single speech. I wish every American could meet the guy. You cannot help but like him. And in 20 months, under the leadership of this man, think about this: regulations reduced, taxes cut, economy growing at 4.2%, lowest unemployment in 20 years, Gorsuch on the court, Kavanaugh going to the court. We're out of that crazy Iran deal. The embassy is now in Jerusalem, and the hostages have been returned from North Korea. It is an amazing record. It is truly a phenomenal record, and the left doesn't like that. They do not like it, and it is going to be, I think the way you frame this election up is you show where they want to take the country, that radical vision they have. They want to impeach our president. They want to raise your taxes. They want to socialize medicine even more, and they do want to abolish ICE and have an open border, right? And where we want to take the country under the president's leadership and more things we have to get done. That's how you frame it up over the next 39 days, whatever we're down to now. And then let's go let the American people choose between those. And I think most Americans are going to choose the right side there. Let me just finish with this. Well, let me say one other thing. When I say liberty's under attack, it is not just from the left, it's also from folks currently in the government. There have been things that have happened because of the nature of my committee assignments. I'm on the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight Committee, and when it was in existence, I was on the Benghazi Committee. We're always in the middle of these crazy scandals that encroach on your liberty. And it started with the IRS. I mean, think about it. Yeah. The IRS, in a systematic way, and for a sustained period of time, went after people just like you. Yes. And why did they go after you? Because they didn't like your political beliefs. They attacked your First Amendment free speech rights. You think about the founders and when they put together the First Amendment, right to practice your faith the way you want, right to assemble, freedom of the press, freedom to petition your government, and freedom to do what else? Do what I'm doing right now, right? freedom to speak. And when they were talking about speech, they were in many ways focused on what kind of speech? Political speech, right? That's the whole point. And what did the IRS do? They went after people for political speech. Terrible. And they did it. They had an orchestrated plan, putting you on a list, making it difficult to get your C3 status and C4 tax exempt status. So then it goes from there to what we saw with what the State Department did when 4 Americans gave their life on 9/11/2012. Tyrone Woods, Glenn Doherty, Sean Smith, and Chris Stevens, trying to cover that up. I mean, on and on it goes. But today, I never thought I'd see anything as bad as the IRS until this FBI thing come along. And I don't know how closely you followed this, but I'll just say this. When have you ever seen this happen at a federal agency? James Comey, director of the FBI, former director, fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, lied 3 times under oath, faces a criminal referral, fired. Jim Baker, chief counsel at the FBI, first demoted, then left the FBI. Lisa Page, FBI counsel, demoted, left the FBI. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI, demoted, then fired. Now, these weren't just any people at the FBI. These were the top people. Not only the top people who ran the Clinton investigation and launched and ran the Russian investigation into President Trump. I've never seen anything like that. And I'm not even talking about Sally Yates and Bruce Orr. Sally Yates has been fired at the Justice Department. Bruce Orr has been demoted twice. This is scary. The idea that you can have one party take a opposition research document, dress it all up, make it look like legitimate intelligence, take it to a secret court to get a warrant to spy on the other party's campaign, that is never supposed to happen in this country, and it did. So this is why it is so important that you all continue your efforts, fighting for the values and principles, as I said, that make us special. Let me finish with just 2 quick thoughts. My favorite statement is one that's not actually, even though my background's wrestling, Isaac, it's actually made by a baseball player. Guy pitched for the Dodgers, Earl Hershiser. And some of you may remember, took him to a World Series championship back in the late 80s, called him the Bulldog. He's tough. He didn't have the fastest fastball, but he just was a tough pitcher, knew how to pitch. Read his book, and early in his book, he says this: great things can happen to ordinary people who work hard and never give up. Great things can happen to ordinary people who work hard and never give up. My favorite word in the statement. My favorite word in the statement is the word ordinary. Stop and think about it. We're all just regular, ordinary people. Nobody's any better than anybody else. We're all in need of God's grace. But in this country, ordinary people don't have to do ordinary things. They can do extraordinary things if they're willing to work hard and never quit. And that is a concept that was there at 1776 all the way to present day. And I would argue there are folks in this country who want to make that so that it's not the norm any longer. They want to make it difficult for regular, ordinary people to chase down their goals and dreams for themselves and their family. They want to make it more difficult. That's what the left really, in the end, would result in if their policies get put in place. That's what we got to preserve. And the way to preserve it is to do what Paul told Timothy. 2 Timothy 4:7, my favorite scripture verse, because it contains words of action. Paul's the old guy giving advice to the young guy, and he says what? Fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. And notice the words he used: fight, finish, keep. Not sissy words, not mamby-pamby words, American words, right? I feel like that verse, I know this, we probably got some pastors in here and they totally disagree with me, but I feel like that verse was written for America, right? We're a country of action. We're people of action. Fight, finish, keep. That is our charge, and you've all been doing that. Keep doing it, and if you do, we'll continue to be the greatest nation ever. God bless you all.